Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Mazza's Musings podcast. As always, thank you for listening. I've got another really fun show, I think, for all the sports fans out there today. Greg Cameron returns. We're going to be doing a little bit more of the NFL draft talk, where we are going to lay out what we think are some pretty good mock drafts that we have done, laying out a couple of different scenarios for the direction that the Patriots could go in. We also talk about some other things going on in Boston and New England sports, some of them good, some of them bad, but overall we try to keep it pretty positive. And speaking of positivity, I really wanted to take a minute to mention some people who were very supportive of me and this podcast project lately. They are Tom and Michelle from the Hyperion Adventures podcast. It's a Disney podcast that now has over 300 episodes. I've really enjoyed some of what they do, so I reached out to them for a little bit of advice, some feedback on what I've been doing, especially with my Disney-related stuff, because that's in their wheelhouse. And they really gave some great feedback, were really supportive, really encouraging. And so I just really want to thank them for the time. If you are into Disney, you really have to check them out. They have some really interesting perspective, having been on both coasts, so they have familiarity with both Disneyland and Disney World. So if that's up your alley, definitely check out the Hyperion Adventures podcast. You can find them pretty much everywhere you can find a podcast. They're all over social media as well. They have their own website. Basically, you can't swing a stick without finding their content or a way to listen to their podcast. So just again, thank you, Tom and Michelle, for your support. And really, everyone, I encourage you to listen if you are a fan of Disney. Outside of that, we've gotten a lot of great response for the Disney-related episodes that we have done. Both myself with Eileen and certainly the one with Megan has garnered a lot of response. You guys really seem to enjoy that. So I'm sure at some point soon we're going to have something back with both of them. I also know that in the near future I'm going to be talking some more movies with Matt Conway, who's the entertainment writer for Reminder Publishing. That also probably is going to have a Disney spin to it. But I promise you, we will have some non-Disney related topics other than the one in this podcast coming up soon. It's just that's the way that things are flowing right now. There's been a lot going on with Disney, with the shareholders meeting, D23 coming up. So we're kind of in a spot where there's a lot of Disney news, and so that's been front of mind. But especially as the year goes on, we're going to have some new experiences, some new things that pop up, and I'm sure that we'll have some other content here for everyone to enjoy. Basically, this all comes down to having fun. So if you have any ideas on things that are fun that we can talk about, or heck, if you want to collaborate with me on something, I'm all ears. I'm definitely up for whatever. Go ahead and shoot me an email at mazzasmusings@gmail.com. You can also find me on Twitter, X at mazzasmusings. The Mazza's Musings podcast also has a Facebook page, and it also has a website, and that web address is mazzasmusings.wordpress.com. These are all ways you can get in touch with me. Love to hear from you, whether you've got an idea for a podcast or you say, hey, have me on. I've got something to talk about. Love to hear from you. In the meantime, I'm going to talk some sports with Greg. Hope you enjoy, and here we go. All right. Well, I am here once again with Greg Cameron. We, a while back, went through a marathon of sorts of all of our favorite prospects outside of those top prospects, those top three at each of the positions. And now we're back to give you a little taste of how we see our favorite potential draft scenarios playing out. But before we get into that, it's an exciting time to be a Boston and New England sports fan. You've got the regular seasons winding down for the Bruins and the Celtics, and in the playoff picture kind of coming into focus there. You've got the Red Sox getting their season started. And of course, the NFL draft is right around the corner, one of the more interesting NFL drafts for the New England Patriots in some time. So we're going to start this off with taking a broader look at the New England sports scene by going over, we're going to talk about our something good that we've seen out of Boston and New England sports of late, something bad we've seen out of Boston sports of late, and then something, because we want to be positive, we're not sports talk radio here. We're going to talk about something great that's going on with Boston sports. So, Greg, would you like to start us off with something good that you've seen in the New England sports scene?
Yes, I actually, thankfully, for some breaking news here, we are recording this on Wednesday, April 10th, literally minutes before Chris and I started podcasting. The reports from ESPN's Adrian Wojnarowski came out that the Celtics have extended point guard Drew Holiday to a 4-year, $137.5 million extension to stay on the parquet floor with the Celtics. And that's my good thing. Drew Holiday is an awesome point guard for the Celtics, the exact kind of point guard a team that has two kind of pretty ball-heavy wings in Tatum and Brown. They need a guy who's a really good lockdown defender on the defensive end and a just really great distributor in the backcourt. And Drew Holiday is the exact right guy to be the point guard of this Celtics team in its current iteration. And I'm really glad that the Celtics are bringing him back. Years and years and years ago, I had covered women's professional soccer, and Drew Holiday's wife, Lauren Holiday, was one of the players on the U.S. women's national team when I covered them at Rentschler Field in Hartford. So I've been kind of following sort of them both, and I think it's really great that both of them will be in Boston for a long time to come.
Very cool. Very cool. My first thing is actually not pro sports. It's that the both Boston College and Boston University are going to be playing in the Frozen Four, which is obviously a big thing for the Boston area and for their fan bases. And kind of as a spin-off of that, though neither of these teams ended up playing here. I'm out here in Springfield, and just had to mention that Springfield did a really great job with their first hosting of a tournament regional. They had some really great attendance, given the fact that they didn't have a BU or something like that they were hoping to get. UMass ended up sneaking into that fourth spot, which kicked BU out. But Denver and UMass really opened up that whole tournament. It was the first game of the tournament. It ended up being a double overtime, really thriller, and really just some great hockey all weekend, some great crowds. I went to the regional championship, and it was really cool to see. A lot of people from Ithaca came out to watch Cornell. Actually ran into somebody in the parking garage who was looking for where to go, who was a Denver fan, but a Denver fan from New Jersey. So, so they were excited that they were able to see their team play on the East Coast. So, it was a very cool, very diverse crowd. The guy who was sitting next to us at the game was actually a Colgate fan who came down to root against Cornell. So there was a little bit of everything, and it was just some great hockey. It was a great time. Obviously, my wife's a BC alum, so she's got her, she obviously has a stake in what happens this weekend, and so I guess I'm saying all the best to BC. No offense to any BU fans who are out there, but I've got to choose my allegiances carefully.
I will say too, I'm really glad that you brought up the Frozen Four. I think that this year's Frozen Four is one of the probably one of the most heavyweight Frozen Fours we've seen, if not ever, certainly in a long time, with teams with such prestigious history as BU and BC, and Denver and Michigan. We're not talking about the Michigan Wolverines, which is kind of crazy considering their history and just how great of a season they've had. I think probably certainly being in the Boston area for myself, and I think being in Hockey East country, I think we kind of get a little mentally clouded a little bit with the history and mystique of the Hockey East. But then when you see these teams like Denver and Michigan, keep competing year in and year out at the national championship level, it's very interesting to sort of see kind of the lack of publicity that those teams are getting in the Frozen Four. But I think ultimately I think with just how good Boston University and Boston College have been all year, I think it's really hard not to think that the national championship game is going to be a battle for Commonwealth Avenue.
For sure. And I mean, I think that one of the things that kind of, I don't want to belabor this too much, but one of the things that kind of hindered some of the attention on Michigan this year was the emergence of Michigan State. And really, it was like, oh, here's the upstart Michigan State. And they kind of like, are they going to be the ones that they ended up beating Michigan in the Big Ten championship, and so it's just like, is this the year that someone other than Michigan is kind of coming out of there? But just you're absolutely right that there's just such great these are blue blood programs. They're great pedigrees, and it's just going to be, as it has been all tournament. There's been just great hockey all around.
Yeah.
So I mean, if you are not into college hockey, I certainly recommend just give it a try. Just turn it on. I mean, the same thing I say when people are, I'm not into women's basketball. It's like, dude, turn it on.
Yeah.
You're going to see something fun. So yeah, so that's a great point by you. All right, so turning it negative, unfortunately, was something bad that's going on in the Boston sports world at this time.
So I'm going to look a little bit further afield when it comes to sort of my bad thing, which is sort of a bad thing coming out of a really great thing. I don't know how much you and I haven't really discussed it much, but I've watched a lot of the women's college basketball tournament. All this whole tournament, it's been a lot of fun. The Caitlin Clark story has been really fun. Watching Dawn Staley's national champion South Carolina Gamecocks, who are just an absolute wagon, just destroy teams, has been really fun. And for me, it's my bad thing as we're recording this is calling the moving screen foul against Connecticut. We can put Connecticut in the Boston sports umbrella. It's really not that far of a drive down 84 to get to stores from here in Boston, but I just think with such a great tournament and especially such a great game between Connecticut and Iowa, those were two teams just trading punches back and forth all night, and Connecticut doing a pretty good job on Caitlin Clark, who absolutely tore up LSU in the Elite Eight. I just think that it was unfortunate that a game that should have been kind of celebrated for just how great it was between two the historically relevant Connecticut and the upstart Iowa with a generational player is sort of going to be remembered now for a call in the last 3 seconds on a moving screen. You and I have covered a lot of high school and college basketball, and we've seen a lot of referee calls at the end of games that have decided things. But I think for such a great tournament, for me it definitely kind of sucks seeing a call like that being called in such a big spot. So for me, it's the last few second call against Connecticut.
Yeah, I'll agree in that it's unfortunate that that's what people are going to focus on. I'm not going to agree if the argument is they shouldn't have called what was an obvious foul.
Yeah,
Yeah, but
that's the thing. It's that the timing was bad.
yeah, I know people want the whistle swallowed in that, and I don't want anything ticky tack, but that
Same.
it was
It was a
to
blatant
me it was
move.
pretty clear,
Yeah.
so I don't fault the referee for calling it, but I definitely agree that the timing and the fact that that's the thing that people are going to focus on, is unfortunate. My bad thing going on in Boston sports is it's really more, I'm really feeling for a guy right now, and that's Trevor Story. Um,
Yeah.
you know, I feel like there's a much like the the foul, how there's something that's being focused on. I feel like a lot of people are turning their anger and disappointment and other things that are going on in within the organization on him. And the injury that he sustained, that is obviously very serious, something that he's taken to heart. He's worked very hard to. It always seems like his body is just like not able to write the checks that he's or cash the checks that he's trying to write, or however that is supposed to go.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's clear that this is a guy who's putting in the work. He wants to be a part of this. He's talked about how eager he was to be a part of this organization, to really prove what he can do for this fan base. And it just sucks to see. And on top of everything else, the reaction that people have, it's just like, it's not his fault that that the organization chose him over a guy that you liked in Xander Bogaerts. And I love Xander as well. It's not his fault, honestly. This isn't like a Pablo Sandoval or something like that, where a guy's just not taking care of himself and took the money and just got for lack of a better
Literally
term,
living off of the fat of the land.
But so I really feel for him. I feel like there's that this was that every time that it feels like something's going to go for him, that something like this comes up. And it's just hard to see. I saw the interview that he did where I mean, he's clearly getting emotional, that this is hitting him as harder than it's hitting anybody else. And so some of the snark and some of the the vitriol that's going his way is really, I think, misdirected. And it's a guy who just really has always wanted to belong here. So I feel for him.
I agree with that, and I think I like Trevor's story. I think off the field more than probably the on the field sample that I've seen here in his Red Sox tenure, though brief as it may be. And I also saw his post game comments. I think they were yesterday when when the news broke that he was going to be out for 6 months and out for the year. And I don't know if you saw any of this at all, but earlier in the offseason, he had started Story Camp, which was basically a training session at his home in Texas for the young infielders in the organization. And I think what was really awesome about that was, he was really taking it seriously, that he was going to be this leader for this organization, and certainly for the guys up the middle coming up. And I think, I can never get mad at a guy who's literally trying to become, a leader for the guys behind him, because, the future at that position isn't Trevor Story for the next several years. If Marcelo Meyer lights up the world at AA and AAA this year, that future is going to arrive on Jersey Street a lot quicker than we think. But I think the fact that Trevor Story has carried himself, like a true professional throughout this entire tenure, whether it was sharing double play duties with Xander Bogaerts in 22, and then kind of working with the young guys. It just, I feel really awful for a guy who's done all the right things, and every time, as you had said, every time it seems like he's going to turn a corner, that his body just sort of betrays him. Especially with the shoulder injury and with the wrist and the heel injuries that he's had. I really hope that he can heal up and be ready to go next season, especially if, by all accounts, next season is going to be a season where the Red Sox are actually going to spend money in the offseason, but I'm not going to hold my breath on that. But, I really hope that this guy is able to be able to find some success here in Boston, because certainly off the field, he sure seems like a guy who's worthy of it.
Yeah, for sure. I think that there's plenty that we could talk about with this organization and the direction that they've decided to take, and where they faltered in the past, and how our skepticism in their desire to win, or if they I mean, I look at them and I think that they're a larger version of the I think it was several years back, there was a story done that the Pittsburgh Pirates had figured out that they were actually more profitable as a losing team than if they put a winning team on the field. Uh,
Yeah.
and and I look at that and I'm just like, man, they're operating under a similar model. You know, it's it's one of those things where I hate thinking that way, but the evidence is starting to stack up a bit. So, but none of that, none of that has to do with Trevor's story, and I think that
No.
that's the big problem is people are
Yeah.
turning their attention the wrong way as far as I'm concerned. But of course, when you've got really an absentee owner and they're throwing Sam Kennedy out there to catch the bullets, you're running out of places to put it. So I get
Yeah.
it, but at the same time, this is a guy who, like you said, he's done all of the right things. So it's hard to see. It's hard to see this.
Yeah. I agree.
All right, so we're going to turn it back positive now. Now I want to hear I want to hear the great thing that you've found going on in Boston or New England sports right now.
All right. I'm going to read you a quote from yesterday's Red Sox broadcast from color commentator Kevin Millar. Quote, we had a little ceremony this morning to give tribute to Tim and Stacy Wakefield, and Mike Timlin had every player stand up, and he told Brianna and Trevor, look around. We are your uncles. We are here for you from this point on. That's one thing that separates this team, the family aspect. We have each other's backs, and not just on the field, but 20 years later, here we are. That was my great thing. I was 16 going on 17 when the Red Sox played that 2004 season, and I'm now 36 going on 37 20 years later. And I think what's so great is the kind of the affirmation of the team that I had so much fun watching, all still really like each other, and they're all still pretty special guys. I think the fact of the group that went yesterday was the exact right faction of the group. Mark Bellhorn not being able to go, notwithstanding, I'm sure our beloved second baseman would have been perfectly fine. But I think certainly the notable absences to that group are very stark in sort of how different they are. Speaking, of course, about Wakefield and Kurt Schilling, but I think I think the great thing is that all 25 of those guys still really like each other and are really still willing to be there for each other and for each other's families. I loved that Brianna Wakefield threw the first pitch yesterday, and the receiver was Jason Varitek, because of course it was going to be Jason Varitek. And I loved that Johnny Damon was holding the trophy and was so happy to be there, even after all the years we as Red Sox fans gave him crap for being a Yankee for a few years. But I just love that that team always comes home, and always comes home in the best, most respectful way to the organization and to the fans. Even if, even if they, in the eighth inning, as the Red Sox were down 5-1, were singing "Sweet Caroline," I could do bad things about the Boston sports market about that one song, but I will spare you. Other than that, great all around.
It was a terrible song before it ruined Boston sports. But
Yes.
this is the positive segment, and
Cheers.
truthfully, I'm right there with you. That was exactly what I had for my great thing as well. I think about the tribute to Tim Wakefield, and thinking about his place on that team, not only as as an athlete, but as as a member of that family. And then thinking back to the year before, and Aaron freaking Boone, and all these all this history that he had with the organization that led up to the championship. And it's I can't think of somebody who was just a classier and better ambassador for Boston sports, for the Red Sox, for baseball, than Tim Wakefield. And
For humanism,
exactly, yeah. I
you
mean,
know,
if you're looking for someone who was really able to connect, the sports world with the real world, and everything like that. Tim Wakefield was, he felt like an everyman. He felt like the kind of person who really helped bridge that gap between fans and the team. He felt so relatable, and he did so many great things for the city of Boston, for the surrounding region, for so many people in ways that beyond the diamond. So I just thought that was about as perfect a way that they could have handled that as possible. For all the things that we can criticize about the Boston Red Sox, you can certainly say that this was one of those things that they just did absolutely beautifully.
Yeah, they got it right. And not to mention too, I'd be remiss if we didn't also talk about the fact that they paid tribute to Larry Lucchino, who was so important in building that team in 2004 too. That I don't know that you necessarily get kind of everything that goes with a lot of those mid-aughts Red Sox teams without Larry Lucchino's influence. And I think without his influence baseball wide, it might have been Gammons who had said something about how, maybe there needs to be a campaign to get Larry Lucchino into the Hall of Fame too. And I can't disagree with him that the new old ballparks whole thing, that's a Larry Lucchino thing. He helped get Camden Yards built. He helped get Petco Park in San Diego built, and he was really instrumental in getting the changes done at Fenway done too. I think for a team that has contributed so much to baseball, it was really nice to see them honor two men who weren't necessarily front and center, kind of receiving the flowers of their contributions.
For sure, absolutely. I couldn't say it better, so I'm not going to try. All right, so moving on to the topic at hand, which is the incoming NFL draft. Basically, what Greg and I did here was we each took a shot at a mock draft. Now, I used the NFL mock draft database. Did you use that as well,
I
or did you
used
go with a
that for
different?
one of them,
Oh,
and then one of my other ones. So I am prepared for all kinds of scenarios. I have done this in the nerdiest, maybe dumbest way possible. So I am prepared for two different scenarios. I am prepared for pick and stay at 3, and with that one, I did the Pro Football Network draft database, and then for the trade down, the kind of prevailing trade down scenario, I used mock draft database for that one.
that's interesting because I tend to go the other way because I find that the PFN one tends to be a little bit more conservative when it comes to trades. Some of the trade
Mhm.
scenarios that the mock draft database comes up with can be a little wild, kind of. So, uh,
I had one earlier that was like, "Hi, would you like the entire Arizona Cardinals
right,
draft for this pick?" I was like, "I would, but there's no way on God's green earth that that's actually going to happen."
right, and
Mike Ditka isn't running the Arizona Cardinals like he was the 1998 New Orleans Saints.
so, and that was one of I mean, we had very few rules for this and everything like that. But the one rule that was basically in place is just like, it's got to be believable. It's got to be a
Yeah,
realistic scenario. And like, anything can happen in the NFL draft. We've seen that. We saw
totally.
what what with Houston, what they pulled last year, which was totally out of left field. So there are things that happen, but I basically threw out any scenario where like the Bears were passing on Caleb Williams at 1 to draft Jared Verse, like just things that are just
I had
not
some where
gonna.
they were taking Dallas Turner, and it was weird.
Right. So, so that was basically the only rule. And obviously, when you're running a draft and I'm running a draft, it's not going to be a complete apples to apples comparison because the simulation may not be the same,
Right.
completely. But I think that this is a pretty good exercise for us in terms of identifying what we think the Patriots are going to go after and where they're going to go after it. Yeah. So, want to go round by round? Did you just want to alternate picks?
We can do round by round. I haven't decided which scenario I'm going with yet. I figure because I'm in your pod house, if you want to choose which scenario you want to go with, I will then make my decision on where I go.
Okay, so the scenario that I went with is the sit and stay, and it's gonna be May.
Great. Perfect. Thank
No,
you,
look,
Justin Timberlake. Thank you. Great. I'm going to do the much more fun scenario for the purposes of this discussion, which I know that there are going to be pain points for you as part of this. This is going to be great. This is
so
going to be awesome podcasting.
so
Yes.
I just as I kept looking at it, it was one of those things that I looked at trade down scenarios like when I started this and I got to three, there was an offer like from the Giants to move from three to six, and I contemplated doing that and then taking JJ McCarthy at six, but as your boy Matisse said, I think even today, you don't go 3 and 14 to draft JJ McCarthy.
You don't. You don't.
So
You do not.
with that in mind, I took Drake May with the number three pick in the NFL draft.
Excellent. I think it's an excellent choice. Um, I think all of the bashing of Drake May kind of confuses me a little bit because all year it has been that he's going to go number two. He's going to go after Caleb Williams. He's going to go second overall, and there are two top quarterbacks in this draft. And then the Jaden Daniels explosion happened for good reason. Jaden Daniels is awesome,
Yeah.
but it weirds me out that all of these kind of talking heads are talking about like, oh, I don't know that May is the guy, and I wonder if that's just like boosting up McCarthy to kind of not in maybe in spite of May or just to boost McCarthy in general. But I would say in the sit and stay at three scenario, Drake May is the guy, and and I think what the Patriots have done this offseason too is really smart. Is that they've signed a veteran quarterback who can play the whole year if you want him to. In Jacoby Brissett, he can play the whole year if you want him to. He's been around a Van Pelt environment, so I think that's a great pick for them. I can envision a scenario where the Patriots sit Drake May, until like Halloween if they have to. Great pick.
Yeah, you've got Brissett in the room, who's someone who can start in this league and can play in this league. So you do have some flexibility there in terms of what you can do. I think that it just comes down to a lot of times you're just overthinking it. You have so much time to think about something, and you just get bored with the same scenario over and over again. So there may be a little bit of that. Now, I mean, and then like you've got guys like Merrill Hodge who just went on Tommy Curran's podcast and just basically said I wouldn't draft this guy in the first round, which is just nuts.
Crazy town.
I mean, outside of Chris Sims ranking him the sixth best quarterback in the class, you're not really seeing a lot of that kind of. So, when you see like another one of those top guys kind of like leapfrog somebody else, I think that a lot of that is people are just like, they're just like,
Yeah.
they've been staring at the same thing for so long. Excuse me, that they all of a sudden are just like, oh well, he's got a problem with his footwork there, that's and so it kind of just snowballs, and it seems to happen every year with somebody. So it's this is the May season for that, I guess.
I seem to recall it happening to our old friend Michael McCorkle Jones in 2021, where all of the talk was, oh, the Niners love him. Niners are going to take him three. Niners are going to take him at three. And it reminds me so much of the McCarthy smoke of
Yeah.
like, I don't know, Washington really likes him, blah, 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 blah. I don't know.
All right. So, do you want to? I think it may be better if we just like why don't you give me
Ping
what
pong?
you've done with your first pick? Obviously,
Okay.
you're trading, I believe here.
Roger Goodell has come to the podium. He's being booed at the moment, and he announces that the New England Patriots have traded the third overall pick to the Minnesota Vikings for picks 11 and 23.
Just
Now,
11 and 23?
that's what the thing.
Okay.
I would have to give up more stuff to get next year's first, but I'm assuming it would be 11 and 23 in a 2025 first,
Yeah.
or if they could somehow eke out getting like a Jordan Addison in that deal, I would run up, but I think it's a 2025 first.
Yeah.
So we'll call it 3 first round picks for number
Okay.
two. So at 11th overall, the New England Patriots select Talise Fuaga, offensive tackle, Oregon State. Yes, the scouting report has him as a really great right tackle. But at the same point, he's the best run blocking tackle in this draft. Who cares if you play him on the right or the left? You have Owenu who's going to play right tackle anyway. So I think drafting a guy like Fuaga who you can move around a little bit and he's pretty good athletically. He really thrives well in a zone run blocking scheme like he did at Oregon State under Jonathan Smith. I think if you trade down, I think you get a tackle like Fuaga at 11, and then you make sure that if if in this scenario, if the quarterback that you're going to take later can sleep a little better at night after night one of the draft.
All right. So, yeah, my concerns are obviously he's a right tackle. He's playing
Yeah,
right tackle. I'm not saying that he can't play left tackle. It's possible, but I feel like drafting a guy that high with the uncertainty of his positional versatility, because he's been pegged a right tackle.
oh yeah.
So I guess that's my concern there. So, but hey, you
I
need
will. I
you
will
need
tell
you
you
need
who
bodies
went.
on the line.
I'll tell you who went 10th to the Jets right before I drafted. It
Was
was a
it
guy that I
Fashanu?
know that you like. It was J.C. Latham,
Ah,
who I love in this draft. If the Patriots go this route, that if Latham's sitting there at 11, that's the guy you take. But he wasn't sitting there when I took it 11th. So I'm going to take Fuaga, and hopefully, Scott Peters can turn him in. Scott Peters and Robert Kugler can kind of turn him into a left tackle. If your worst case scenario is that you then move Owenu over to the left side, there are worse things that have been done to the offensive line of this Patriots franchise in the last 3 years anyway.
or hey, you've got a hell of a right side of the line if you just kick
Yeah,
Owenu inside, and obviously that
yeah,
leaves you with a hole on the left, but you know,
it does. And so, as part of this scenario, the Patriots are still in the first round.
hmm
And at the 23rd overall pick, the Patriots take Adonai Mitchell, wide receiver, Texas. He's been a guy that you and I have really liked this entire draft season. And I think that's your big play guy. That's your future number one guy. If not on this team, your number one guy. And he was a transfer from Georgia, scored the winning touchdown in the national game tying touchdown in the national championship game at Georgia. Transferred to Texas, played really well for a Texas team that was top four all year. They had a very interesting offense under Steve Sarkisian. And I think of the two wide receivers, he's probably the more polished between he and Xavier Worthy. So seeing as though he was the top wide receiver left on the board at 23, uh, A.D. Mitchell will be coming to Foxborough at 23rd overall.
So I also had a receiver. I actually in my draft, unfortunately the website is not cooperating with me again, but I do have the general gist. I do know that there was a run on receivers at the end of the first round. So after Mitchell said goodbye to me, I turned my attention to and traded up to the 27th pick and selected Brian Thomas Jr. out of LSU. It was one of those things where there had been the run on tackles earlier in the first round, similar to like the situation where you grabbed a tackle. That happened in my draft, and then the receivers started coming off the board. So I traded up to 27, took a guy who can take the top off the defense, and has a little bit of a limited route tree right now, but really is a guy who can provide that deep threat right off the bat day one. So
Yeah, and I think any other year on any other team, Brian Thomas would be a top 10 pick.
yeah,
He'd be the number one at LSU, being the top target for a Heisman Trophy quarterback. But because of the Malik Neighbors of it all, he was the number two, and he was a luxurious number two
yeah.
for the Bayou Bengals.
All right, so now moving on to the second round. I did not have obviously I traded up 227, so I don't have a second round pick. So this one's all you.
So I have a second round pick. It is a second round pick I know you're not gonna like, but I'm gonna try. I'm gonna try my darndest here to really sell you on who I'm taking at 34th overall. The New England Patriots select quarterback from the University of Oregon, Bo Nix. Here's the deal. Here's the deal about the Patriots taking Bo Nix at 34 in this scenario. I don't really like it. I don't. But as we've said before, the Patriots have signed Jacoby Brissett to be the quarterback for at least the start of this year. If your worst case scenario is you have Jacoby Brissett play the entire year, you have Bo Nix sit for a year, learn everything. He has literally never had a year where he just sits and soaks everything up. He was playing as a true freshman at Auburn in one of the worst circumstances that I can remember in college football. So I think the best thing for Bo Nix is Jacoby Brissett, because then you get your quarterback for the next several years after he learns how to be an NFL pro for a year. I'm taking Bo Nix at 34th overall in this scenario. And honestly, I could see the Patriots doing the same. They met with him at the scouting combine and they went to Oregon's pro day. I could see it happening. I'm not saying that I'm a proponent of it, but I can see it happening.
Yeah, I look at Bo Nix, and the one thing that I don't see any one, or I don't see a set of traits that I'm just like, wow, this guy has the tools to be, the guy. He's a guy.
He's a guy.
I'm not going to say that he's terrible, but the same thing. I'm not I'm not going 3 and 14 to take Bo Nix, and hope that Bo Nix is going to be my next, is going to be the guy for me. I know you're playing out a scenario here, but I mean,
Yeah.
I just, and I've had my fun with, and between the two, if they were going to take somebody around this level, I'd much rather it be a Michael Penix. I'd much rather even like a scenario where they trade back into the late first round for a Michael Penix as opposed to a Bo Nix. I just feel like I've seen, I just feel like there's more potential to be that guy from Penix than a Nix.
And
But
yet, Elliot Wolf doesn't necessarily think the same way that we do when
clearly
it comes to Michael
not.
Penix, because
Yeah,
they haven't even spoken to him once.
right. Yep. So yeah, clearly not. So I as much as I hate it, I can see that being a scenario. To me, that's laying up. That's that
Yeah,
instead
you're
of
not going for the green at that point.
exactly. And I'm sorry, you just had the season that you had. You just had a triple bogey. Just take out the
Yeah,
driver and whack it. As far as I'm
yeah,
concerned,
grip it and rip it.
like yeah.
I agree.
So, but yeah. So anyway,
I try to
I
work
feel
under
like
your parameters of realism here. I try to,
fair enough.
because look, Penix I think was still sitting there, but I was like, I can't take him because the Patriots haven't even talked to him.
Now that would be the ultimate smokescreen.
Ugh. Wouldn't that be the most Bill move ever, though? Because who was it? Was it Keon White last year who was like, yeah, I never talked to him.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't talk to him once. I had no idea they were interested. Oh, my
Everybody,
face was weird. Like, it was. Yeah,
Everybody thought that they were looking at Josh Downs on the screen with
yeah.
that yeah,
It
the
was Keon
background
White.
photo.
Yeah.
All right,
On to the third round.
on to the third round. So I've got sitting pat at 68. I have the Patriots selecting their tackle, and it's Patrick Paul out of Houston. Obviously he's a step below, those marquee names that we see that really that there was a run on them in the first round, but I mean, he's just a physical, athletic specimen, and a lot of his issues that I've seen different people have with him feel coachable. There are things about hand placement and things like that are definitely things that you can work with a young guy on. Yeah, and I just think that he's a great tools prospect who you can maybe not stick on the end of the line day one and just set it and forget it, but the potential is there that he's a guy who maybe is being a bit underappreciated and could be a steal at the third round.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. I think, I mean, for forever, as we were kind of mocking drafts this offseason, he was a guy who people were thinking was going to be a top of the second round guy. And I think it's very interesting, sort of how things have sort of started to level out, especially with Patrick Paul. But if again, if your scenario is that you're taking your tackle in third, you could do a heck of a lot worse. I would assume probably guys that would go around the same kind of area are like Fisher, and probably a little bit later than that, like guys like Fisher and Matt Gonsalves and those guys to be tackles. But of the bunch of sort of that like past the second round kind of bushel of tackles, you could do a heck of a lot worse than Patrick Paul.
And he's a left tackle.
Yeah,
Like you look at Blake Fisher and he's a right tackle, and you're like, yeah, we might be able to make him a left tackle. No, just take a left tackle.
yeah, yeah,
It's not like you've got the boat or you've got the mystery box, and the mystery box could be a boat. No, just take the boat.
yeah, yeah. All right. So in the third round, the Terry Fontenot of the Atlanta Falcons has called up Elliott Wolf, clamoring for pick 68. We oblige. So we've traded 68 for picks 79 and 197 in the 2024 draft, and we also receive a 2025 fifth rounder as a part of this trade off. And at number 78 overall, the New England Patriots, run by Greg Cameron, have taken Xavier Legette, wide receiver, South Carolina. I think in this draft, the Patriots need playmakers. They just need playmakers. They need guys who can catch the ball, guys who run fast after they catch the ball. And you and I have sort of been talking about, do they do a wide receiver double dip? I've been doing wide receiver double dips in my mocks lately because they need wide receivers. If there's a chance that the Patriots can punt Juju Smith-Schuster into the sun, I am all for it. I am all for it. I think how they've already kind of made changes to that room. I love them signing KJ Osborne. KJ Osborne's a great number two. He's a great number two. But they need a number one, and they need to figure out who their number ones are. So I think if you can get a guy like Mitchell in the first, if you kind of make this trade with Minnesota, and then be able to still get Xavier Legette kind of midway through the third, you run that card up and you just say thank you and keep going awaiting the fourth.
Absolutely. That one I co-sign 100%. I think that he's got rare tools, and the rare kind of size speed combo that really could obviously present something that they don't have right now, and can really be a catalyst for the offense, and it's great when you have a young quarterback too, to have somebody that you put the ball in this guy's hands and something's going to happen.
Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely. That's a great pick.
He reminds me a lot of, especially in the scenario where I take Knicks in the second, He reminds me a lot of Troy Franklin, who's also in this draft. They have a similar skill set and tool set. So, especially if I'm arming a Bo Nix with weapons, I try and get him a weapon that's very similar to what he had in Eugene.
Legette's a little bigger though, isn't he? He's a little heavier. Is
He's
that?
a little heavier and
Yeah.
about an inch and a half shorter.
Okay, so he's a little stockier than
Yeah,
yeah, because I look
he
at some of them.
compares to like a DK Metcalf is
Right.
sort of like the high ceiling comp.
Okay. Alrighty. So let's see. I'm sorry. What number pick do you have next? I'm not sure where we're going
My
from.
number pick that I have next is 103.
103. All right. So we're through the first three rounds. If you want to just go through, just so we're reviewing as we go here, your picks through the first three rounds, and then we'll move on to four.
Yes, at 11th overall, I've taken Talise Fuaga, tackle from Oregon State. At 23rd overall, I took A.D. Mitchell, wide receiver from the University of Texas. 34th overall, I took Bo Nix, quarterback out of the University of Oregon. And at 79, I took Xavier Legette, wide receiver, University of South Carolina Gamecocks.
All right. And as for my first three round selections, I had Drake May at 3. I traded up to 27 for Brian Thomas, and then stayed put at 68 and took Patrick Paul. All right. So now we head to 103, and you have a pick at 103. So why don't you go ahead with that?
Yes, at 103, I have taken edge rusher from the University of Kansas, Austin Booker. Booker is a really toolsy guy on the edge. The Patriots kind of secretly need a guy on the edge. Matthew Judon, as much as we love him, as much as we love Mr. Red Sleeves, he's getting older, and Dietrich Wise is getting older too. So I think you kind of have to think about who your next guy on the edge is. And Booker was a guy the Patriots brought in for a 30 visit, I believe, late last week or kind of later in the week, and there was, I want to say it was somebody like either Phil Perry or Burt Breer. We were talking about how that's absolutely a guy that the Patriots could definitely take. I think it was Phil Perry. I think Booker was one of the prototypical Patriots that he had on the edge. So so again, trying to adhering to your realism stipulations here. I have them taking Austin Booker, a guy who they've met with at least certainly in Foxborough in the recent term here.
Yeah, he was someone that I looked at a lot at that pick as well, especially knowing that the Patriots had brought him in, and the NFL comp for him is Max Crosby. Now, what makes
Right.
Max Crosby is that Max Crosby is freaking insane. So,
Yes.
so I think that comp is more of a physical tools comp than this guy is going to be Max Crosby, but certainly that's a skill set that you need some young talent with that kind of skill set, because you really don't have a lot, especially building towards the future. People who are under contract a year or two from now, you don't have a lot of that.
Right.
So absolutely.
I mean, you have Anthony Jennings, who I think you and I both really like. He's a little bit of a late bloomer, but he's turned into something pretty special on the edge. And you still have Josh Uche for another year, but who knows if he breaks out again or if he's just a rotational guy. If he's kind of a 2024 Mark Anderson. I think that
Right.
was the comp that you and I had talked about.
Yeah.
And we loved Mark Anderson. Mark Anderson was great. He went to the Pro Bowl that one year. But I could see them looking to get a little bit of youth and a little bit of speed out on the edge.
All right. So I actually received a trade here, and again, I don't have the website in front of me, unfortunately. So I don't have the exact trade, but I ended up trading down from 103 to 126, and I also picked up a future pick that I don't have the pick,
Okay.
unfortunately. But I traded down from in this draft. I traded down from 103 to 126, and I selected Cam Hart from Notre Dame, the corner from Notre Dame.
Great.
Uh, he's a guy who can play the outside. They've also been looking for somebody who, who can perhaps play more of that free safety role because they don't have that guy. So he's a guy who, even if he doesn't have, say a starting role, it's good depth to have. He's a big bodied kind of corner who, he hasn't picked up a pass since I think 2021, but that's because they rarely throw at him.
Yeah.
So I think he allowed something like 16 catches last year or something ridiculous like that. I think I brought that up
You
when
did.
we were doing this before. I don't remember the exact stat, but it was just like,
I think it
yeah,
was 16, I
he
believe.
doesn't have those ball skill numbers, not necessarily because he doesn't have them, but because guys just didn't look his way. Quarterbacks did not look his way when he was in coverage. So, yeah, that to me, it's a sneaky need outside of, outside of your number one corner, you've got room to move guys around. So, I feel like that's something that after round four, feels like that's when they're going to take that defensive guy, and that's an area of need.
Yeah. I also agree with that. My next pick actually is a cornerback. So I can see them taking one in this draft. I mean, certainly I took one in this
Mm-hmm.
draft here, but it's very interesting that I think we both are kind of on the same page, looking for just trying to fill out, certainly on the defensive side of the ball. I think both on the edge and at corner, those are definitely places where I think the Patriots are going to look to kind of fill in some gaps. And I think Cam Hart, by the time that I'd gotten to my next pick at 137, he was off the board at that point. But I wanted to make sure I got my edge guy. But I think that's a great pick for the Patriots. I could see them absolutely just getting somebody who's a steady Eddie at corner. They don't really have many of those guys at the moment, other
Yeah.
than Christian Gonzalez. That's pretty much it. And Jonathan Jones, that's about it.
And as much as Jonathan Jones can hold his own on the outside, I'd much rather him in his more natural position.
Yeah, playing the star corner in the slot. Exactly.
All right. So let's see. Do you have a 137 pick?
I do indeed.
All right. So do I, but you go ahead and go first here.
All right. At 137, the New England Patriots select Kalen Carson, cornerback, Wake Forest. As we talked about kind of a lot of similar things with Cam Hart, I think I think at this point in the draft, the Patriots are going to try and draft a corner. I'll tell you, the mock draft database has really been trying to, over the course of some of my mocks, trying to get me to take Jalen Simpson from Auburn really late in the draft. They're really trying to push those Auburn Tigers on me. But I think Kalen Carson was a guy we talked about in our draft pod. I think he was one of your guys. I want to say,
Mm-hmm.
and and after kind of listening to you about a lot of the qualities that Carson possesses, I really felt like he was a guy kind of in the early going that I didn't really kind of pay much attention to, and then really just got a sense, the cornerbacks of the Patriots need are guys like Cam Hart and Kalen Carson. So for me, I think being able to get a good cover guy this late in the draft, the Patriots should absolutely just kind of take the pick and run, especially with a guy like Carson who's got a good head on his shoulders, is a really good player in the secondary. Patriots don't have many of them, certainly at corner. So I think Kalen Carson would be a guy who'd fit really well with DeMarcus Covington's defense.
For sure. Yeah. And he's just one of those guys who he just looks like an NFL corner.
Yeah,
He may have some, again, the things that you can point to that are issues with his game are things that are mostly coachable. So, I'll take that.
totally.
I'll take the guy with the tools, who needs a little coaching up, any day. So yeah, I love that pick. Obviously, I talked a lot about him in our earlier podcasts. So Yeah, kind of similar idea to what I was going with Cam Hart. You know, a guy who looks the role, maybe is a little rough around the edges, but can certainly have a role in day one, and kind of develop into a larger role as their career goes on.
Totally. No, I wholeheartedly agree.
All right, so my pick at 137, I got the developmental tight end. You look at the tight end room right now. You've got a couple of guys in Hunter Henry and sorry, Austin Hooper.
Austin Hooper, baby.
um, who are, just kind of, truthfully, they're steady eddies. I mean, you know what you're going to get out of them. Certainly, one of them is more productive in the passing game than the other one, but you've got Hooper, who's coming from another spot where he was familiar with the system, and so that's great. So this is a good position to take take a stab at that developmental tight end. Someone who you're not going to be asking to go out there on day one and and shoulder a large load. Someone who can kind of develop, especially, we've talked about how the tight ends rarely have that kind of impact in year one. It's a difficult position. It's a difficult position to learn in the NFL. We've heard about coaches saying that, tight end coaches make the best head coaches because they're involved in so many different aspects of the offense. So I think that this is a good spot for a tight end. It's also someone who has a little bit different profile, a little bit more of a athletic specimen, and can be a little bit more of that seam stretching offensive weapon, and that's Theo Johnson out of Penn State. So that's
Yeah.
I just gave all the reasoning why. I also think that he's someone who he's got the body that he could develop into a decent blocker, but he's just not right now. So he'd be work in progress in that respect. But in terms of somebody you take later in the draft and see what you can make out of him. He seems like somebody who I like the profile.
Yeah, no, I agree. I also take a tight end at some point in this draft, but it's not Theo Johnson. Again, we've been sort of mocking drafts to each other, so we sort of know each other's like
Right.
preferences in certain players that both of us really like. But I think Theo Johnson's absolutely the kind of guy who, especially learning under a Hunter Henry and an Austin Hooper, two guys who have been out there and done it.
Hmm.
I think for the Patriots being able to take a tight end in this draft, especially somebody who has the offensive upside compared to the blocking upside, is a good thing for them. And I think sort of the blocking aspect of that, especially with the veterans they have in house, you can teach that. And it's going to be interesting what this offense sort of shakes out and looks like, especially for a tight end. So I love the pick at 137 for Theo Johnson.
All right. So I don't have another pick until 193 because if I recall, my pick 180 was part of my trade up into back into the first round.
Okay.
So you can have at it with what you've got in between there.
Excellent. I have a pick 180 in this year's draft. The New England Patriots select Tanner Bartolini, interior offensive lineman from Wisconsin. For me, Wisconsin is known for two things. The University of Wisconsin, known for two things: really good running backs. Well, three things: really good running backs, nobody going to Bo Callahan's birthday party in the 2014 NFL Draft, as showcased by Kevin Costner, and third, really darn good interior offensive line play. They've they've just been pumping out just corn-fed linemen forever, and I think Bartolini is the next of those guys. The Cole Street or you can't really rely on Cole Strange to stay healthy. It's going to be interesting of who plays right guard in this offense. Is it Nick Leverett? Is it City So? Is it, God forbid, Antonio Mafi? And David Andrews, despite how much we love him, he's not exactly getting younger. And you know, we all love David Andrews as Patriots fans. We want to make sure that David Andrews, can stay healthy and certainly be in as good of health as he can when he steps away from the sport. So I can see Tanner Bartolini being the next guy, kind of who can be kind of that be a guard or a center for the New England Patriots, and I just feel like Wisconsin just always produces just really awesome linemen, especially in the middle of the line. So at 180 overall, Patriots take Tanner Bartolini.
Yeah, basically all you had to say was interior offensive lineman from Wisconsin. And
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, I think that I had a tendency to move away from that simply because of how much has been invested in that. But you're right that there's not a lot of sure things. I mean, you got a pretty good showing as City So once he kind of solidified himself. But outside of that, there are questions. You do have some depth issues there. So yeah, that seems like a good spot to take that kind of pick.
yeah. And I think at this point, there's a hockey blogger I love. I don't know if you've ever seen any of Steve Dangle's stuff. He's a Maple Leafs guy. And he does these like trade trees when he talks about like trading draft picks. Draft picks they're magic beans. You don't know
Right.
what they could be. They could be again. It's like the whole thing of do you take the mystery box or do you take the boat? Who knows? The mystery box could be a boat. But I think that at this stage in the draft, you're just drafting magic beans and trying to see what shakes out.
Yeah, absolutely. Alrighty. So I'm moving on to unless I'm mistaken, you don't have another pick from any of your trades or anything at this point, right? Between
I have 197 from one of my trades,
Okay.
but we're
All
not
right.
there yet.
So I'm going down to 193. My selection there is James Williams, safety from Miami. We talked about him again, another guy
We
that we
did.
talked about, in our earlier podcasts. He's just another one. He's one of these tools guys. You're taking a swing on the tools, and he's such a unique kind of specimen back there. And I contemplated not taking a safety, especially with Duggar signing the extension, but it's one of those things where this guy could be more of like that Swiss Army knife. So he's not really taking anybody's spot, filling a void in that regard. I don't think that there are some tools that overlap with some of the guys they have on the roster, but he's so unique. And obviously now the Patriots have the Miami connection, so it felt like this was the kind of stab that this feels like a kind of guy that Gerard Mayo would be like, oh, let's bring him in and see what we can have him do.
Yeah, and I think the idea of having Alonzo Highsmith as part of this front office really sort of makes that kind of pipeline from Coral Gables to Foxborough definitely something that would be a reality. He was a guy I also really loved. I think when I got to 193, he had just been taken. So, but he's a guy who I could absolutely see the Patriots taking. It's either him or Kinchins. And I think taking Kinchins as high as Kinchins is going to go would be not smart for
Yeah,
the Patriots to do, especially with so many holes on defense or on rather on offense. Sorry. So I think being able to kind of take a safety of the caliber that they're taking here would be a great selection for them.
yeah. I mean, I love Kitchens. I think that he's gonna fall
I think so
because
too.
of his combine. But he's one of those guys who, the testing doesn't reflect what you see on the field. He's just one of those guys who it's just different when he's playing football. He's not a track star. Like so.
No,
Asking him to run the 40 is not. But anyway, he's not someone we're drafting. So well,
no.
all right. So let's see. I believe that you then would again be on the clock at 197.
I am on the clock at 193.
Oh, sorry, that I skipped over your 193. Sorry
It's all
about
good.
that.
It's all good. At 193, I have the New England Patriots taking AJ Barner, tight end, Michigan. I see Barner as such a developmental tight end. He's a good blocker, and his offensive game isn't necessarily all the way there yet. So I could see the Patriots taking a developmental tight end. On the other side of it, they don't necessarily really have a great blocker in the tight end room.
Yeah.
So I could see them taking somebody who is a little bit more of like the Who Man type, like a Barner who was a good blocker and just good on the line, and a guy like AJ Barner at 193.
Yeah, I actually thought about taking another tackle at 193 to kind of thinking like those big sets, those jumbo packages and things like that instead of having another blocking tight end, throw another tackle out there on the line.
Cam
But
Fleming type.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I was thinking like Christian Jones in that spot before I went with the
Yeah.
safety, and I was just truthfully, I was just tantalized by the tools that Williams has, but yeah, I think that you're absolutely right that they could use some help blocking at the end of the line there with the blocking tight end. So yeah, great pick. All right, so now we're on to 197, correct?
We are.
All right.
And this is a pick that I did specifically for this podcast. I want you to know that I had the Mazza's Musings cinematic universe on my brain when I made this pick at 197. Again, this was a pick as part of the trade back with the Falcons. At pick 197 in the 2024 NFL Draft, the New England Patriots select Dylan Laube, running back, University of New Hampshire.
Yes.
A guy we both love, as we were talking about the guys in the podcast the last time that we potted together. It's time to get kind of the next James White. I don't think that it's necessarily it was Brian Robinson who they got.
Antonio Gibson.
Antonio Gibson. They
Yeah.
played in the same backfield.
Yeah.
Antonio Gibson, both of whom I had on fantasy teams. So that's probably why I kind of mixed them up. But I don't necessarily. Part of me feels like Antonio Gibson, especially if he plays well, isn't necessarily here for a long time, but maybe here for a good time. And I think being able to get a guy from your backyard, I mean, if you want to count Durham, New Hampshire, your backyard, I think being able to get a guy who can do a little bit of everything that's from your region is something the Patriots should do, especially at 197. We've seen the Patriots take guys in the high 190s who have gone from being just like, oh, why don't we take a dart throw, to then being pretty good players. I'm not going to say who I'm thinking of with being a pretty good player in the high 190s. I think we all know, but I think being able to get kind of that scat back, pass catching back, especially this late, is pretty great. And that you wouldn't want to, and for me, I wouldn't want to necessarily have to settle at 231 for Rasheen Ali from Marshall, who we both really like, but who just has an injury history that is almost Malcolm Mitchell level concerning.
Yeah. No, I'd agree. Yeah, no, and I would love it. I did kind of think that Antonio Gibson's signing may have thrown some water on this, but you've talked me into hope again. You've given me hope again, so thank you for that.
You're welcome. I have done the opposite of what Jeremy Renner wants Ben Affleck to do in The Town. Don't give me hope.
All right. So the next one that I've got is 231. Is that where you are? Okay. All right. So
and that's my final pick.
That's my final as well. All right. So I'm just going to blow through this here. I've got a 231 guy that you really liked the last time that we potted, Dylan Johnson, Washington. Just a running back. The dude, the dude is just a solid back. He's a guy who you can trust with the football, and kind of he can offer a spell to the guys in front of him. He may be a guy that you end up stashing, seeing if you can stash on the practice squad, and that's fine too. When you're picking at this point. But yeah, I thought about, there are a few guys here, but truthfully, I mean, I just went with a guy who had some experience playing in big games too, and really, tried to gut it out through a tough injury in the national championship, which
Yeah.
to me, which means something to me. So
Yeah. No, I agree. I agree. I love Dylan Johnson. He was one of my guys the last time that we had podcasts talking about running backs, and you could kind of tell that the Washington Huskies were getting a little deflated when he went out in the national championship game against Michigan. So again, as a late round lottery ticket, you never know what you have with guys like that, especially in the backfield. This late in the draft, and he's a guy I really like, and I think he could be a true bell cow back, especially if he maybe has the Foxborough flu for a year. As they kind of get ready for this season. He's a guy I really like. Yeah, that's a great pick. Not to sound all Lee Corso, great pick. I should have the Ticonderoga with me, but
alrighty, so we've only got a couple minutes left here. So who do you have at 231?
at 231, the New England Patriots take Caden Wallace, offensive tackle, Penn State. Another guy that the Patriots have had a 30 visit with. They visited with him the other day at Foxborough. So my thought here is at the end is, you can never have too much tackle depth. We've seen that the last couple of years. I mean, having to play City So and Mafi at the tackles, and really hoping that like Riley Reif's knees are somehow not put together with macaroni and Elmer's glue. So I think getting a depth tackle like Caden Wallace, who played on a pretty good line opposite Olu Fashanu in Happy Valley, would be just a great little cherry on top of a pretty solid draft, all things considered, in the trade down scenario.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, hey, this has been awesome. Thanks very much for doing this again. Tons of fun, as always. So we have about a minute left here. If you could say one thing, what is the one thing that you would love to see the Patriots do in this draft? What is it?
Get the quarterback for the future.
Amen. Amen. And it's going to be May.
It's gonna be May. Yeah.
Thank you. You did that so I didn't have to.
Sure did.
All right, bud. Hey, thanks a lot again.
Of course.
All right, well, that just about wraps this episode of the Maz's Musings podcast. Man, Greg put out a scenario that seems entirely plausible to me, but is also one that might keep me up at nights if Bo Nix ends up being the next quarterback of the New England Patriots. But overall, we had some fun. We love talking about this stuff. I'm sure that I'll be back on with Greg at some point to talk some sports, probably some Bruins. I know that he's got a lot of knowledge on the Celtics as well, that he can fill me in on some things that I'm a little bit ignorant on. Obviously, the Red Sox are just getting into their season, and we talked about that a little bit, of course, on the negative side, but you kind of wonder how much positive there's going to be this year for the Red Sox. But anyway, as always, thank you so much for listening. You can find this podcast and all of the previous episodes on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Music, and on YouTube. You can also reach out to me on Twitter, X, at Maz's Musings. You can send me an email at mazasmusings@gmail.com. You can find the Maz's Musings podcast Facebook page, or check out the podcast and contact me through the website, which is mazasmusings.wordpress.com. All of these great ways to get in touch with me, listen to the content, and to have some fun, because really that's what this is all about, is having fun. If you want to drop me a line, if you want to collaborate on something, please let me know. Happy to hear from you. And in the meantime, have a great weekend, have a great week, and once again, thanks for listening.